Hello everyone, I am Sujay Datta. Today we will be looking at a question on time and distance which involves to and fro movement. So there are different versions of this to and fro movement type of question. This is type 1. So it says A and B start from two places P and Q. So let us draw P and Q. This is 80 kilometers and they move towards each other at 5 and 3 kilometers per hour. So A is starting from this end 5 kilometers per hour and B is starting from this end, that is 3 kilometers per hour. Now once they reach the opposite ends, they will turn back and move back. So that means they will keep on going. A will go here, then come back and again go. B will keep doing the same. And we have to first figure out the time taken by them to meet for the first time. So now when we are doing this for meeting for the first time, we will use something which is called relative speed. Now what is relative speed? So let us understand that first. So when A and B are moving, let us say towards each other, or A and B are moving in the same direction, okay. So there are two possibilities, they are moving opposite direction or they are moving in the same direction. So what happens when they are moving in opposite direction? Let us say A speed is 10 meters per second, B speed is say 5 meters per second, and let us say this distance is 60 meters. Question is, how long will it take for them to meet? Now observe that since they are approaching near each other, for every second A is coming closer by 10, B is coming closer by 5, so they are coming closer by 15. So here the relative speed means basically the speed of one with respect to the other, okay, speed of one with respect to the other. So relative speed is effectively added 15 meters per second. This can be imagined to be as if B is not moving, so we can take it as B is not moving, speed is 0, and A is making or covering distance at 15 meters per second, okay. So make this 0, make the value here plus 5, so it becomes 15 meters per second. So now if it is 15 meters per second, how long will it take them to meet? So 60 divided by 15, the time taken will be 4 seconds. Okay, so the time taken will be 4 seconds because B is not moving, right? So we can assume as if A is covering the whole 60, so 60 divided by 15, 4 seconds. Let's assume, let's calculate whether we see that actually in 4 seconds they are going to meet or not. In 4 seconds B will cover 20 meters, 5 times 4, and A will cover 40 meters, 20 and 40 will add up to 60. So that is the total distance. Similarly here, if A is travelling at 10 meters per second and B is travelling at 5 meters per second and the gap between them is 60 meters, what is happening is B is running away 5 but A is overtaking 10. So overall speaking, A is coming closer to B by 5. So here the relative speed is now going to be the difference of the two, so 5 meters per second. Once that is done, the time taken therefore would be 60 divided by 5, so that is 12 seconds. Here also we can assume that B is actually not moving, stationary, and A's speed has become 5. So A has to cover the entire 60 meters at the speed of 5 meters per second, and hence will take 12 seconds. So in short, what we have is, if two objects are moving, so we can write down the relative speed concept here. So in the same direction, relative speed is speed of the faster object minus speed of the slower, and to find out the time you will divide the relative distance or the gap between them by the relative speed. If they are in opposite direction, you will have relative speed to be speed of the faster plus speed of the slower. So again we will divide the distance by this relative speed to calculate the time. Now with this information, now let us come back to our question. So in this question we had A is moving at 5, B is moving at 3. So they are moving in opposite direction. For the answer to the first part, the relative speed for this is 5 plus 3, 8 kilometers per hour, and therefore the time taken to meet would be the distance divided by 8, so 10 hours. That is the answer to the first question. Okay. In 10 hours, A would have covered 50, B would have covered 30, so 50 plus 30 would actually be 80. So meeting M. Next question they are saying is find the time by them taken by them to meet for the second time. Okay. Now if you look at their speeds, which are 5 and 3. So now A I am drawing with a straight line, continuous. For B I am using a dotted line. Okay. So this is the first meeting that has happened. A is going to reach the end and turn back. B is still going, and at some point it will also turn back and they will meet again. This could be one scenario. Okay, this is a possibility. What else could be a possibility? The other possibility could be A goes all the way, turns back and also goes back, but because B is so slow, he just manages to reach till here. He has not even completed one complete lap, whereas A has completed once, then comes back and then turns back. So that could also be a possibility. Okay. Now we don't know which one of the two cases it is. Okay. But now if I look at this, if you look carefully, A has travelled once, twice and more than twice. The same distance A has covered once, twice and more than twice, while B has covered only not even once. So the ratio of the speeds according to this diagram for speed of A to speed of B should have been more than 2 divided by less than 1, which is clearly greater than 2. Okay. You have covered more than twice the distance. So 2 times the distance more than that, and this is not even one distance, so less than 1, so maybe 0.5, 0.8 like that. Okay. And that ratio, so you have something more than 2 divided by something which is a fraction. Obviously the result is greater than 2, but is the speed ratio greater than 2? 5 divided by 3 is not greater than 2, so that means this is not the case. Okay. So what is the case then? So the case must be that B travelled, A reached this end, turned back, and B managed to turn back as well, and they met in the opposite direction. So this must have been the case. So A turned back, did not overtake B, B is also going. Before A could reach the end and turn back, B managed to reach the end and turn back. So both of them have covered. A has covered more than one lap, B has also covered more than one lap. So this must be the correct scenario in this case. Now once we have understood that this is the correct scenario, now how do we find out the time taken? So for that is a simple diagram. See, for the first meeting that was there, okay, when A had covered this much while B had covered till here, that was our first meeting. Distance covered by A and distance covered by B for the first meeting, let us put it A1 B1, that was the total distance 80, right. But now distance covered by A for the second meeting and distance covered by B for the second meeting from the beginning, like from the original ends. If you look at it, A has covered one length, B has covered one length, and these two together have covered one length. So total these two together have covered 3 times the total distance. So that is 3 times 80 for the second meeting. Okay, this is meeting 2. This was for meeting 1. If there was a third meeting and this process continued, then they would have to cover 5 times the total distance, 5 times 80 and so on. Okay. Now, if the distance has tripled the total distance, that means each of their distances must have become 3 times. Okay. Each of their distances must have become 3 times because they did not change their speeds, and whatever time A is travelling, B is also travelling for the same time. So, their time is same, their speeds have not changed. For the first meeting they together covered 80. So, for the second meeting when they covered together 3 times, each of them has travelled thrice their respective distances. Now, for the first meeting we already knew that the distances were 50 kilometers and 30 kilometers, right, 50 kilometers and 30 kilometers. So, for the second meeting, when A2 is now covered, A has covered now thrice the distance, so that would be 150. So, that means A covered the full 80 and then 70 more. So, that means the second meeting happened 10 kilometers from this end. Okay, 10 kilometers from this end. Why? A has to cover 50 times 3 times 150. So, that is 80 plus 70. So, 10 kilometers left. B also should have covered 30 times 3, 90. Let us check. B covered the full 80 and came back 10, and that is how B covered 90 kilometers. So, if they had asked where do they meet for the second time, that is not the question, but if they had asked where they meet for the second time, that would be 10 kilometers from the end of P. And like this we can figure out for each of the positions where the meeting will happen. Now, if you look at the second question, they are just asking time taken by them to meet. So, that is pretty easy. Once we know that they have to cover thrice the distance, obviously they are going to take 3 times the time. So, for the first time it took 10 hours, for the second meeting it must have been 30 hours. Okay. From the beginning it has taken 30 hours, or we can say that 20 hours after the first meeting. Now, for the third part of the question, when will they meet at any of the ends? Now, if you look at this, A is travelling at a speed of 5 and B is travelling at a speed of 3. So, that means A by B speed ratio is 5:3. What this means is, by the time A manages to cover 5 laps, so 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, he eventually will reach here. At the same point, at the same time, B would have only been able to cover 3 laps. So, he would have gone 1, 2 and 3, and B would have finally reached here. So, B started from here, A started from here, A ended up here after covering 5, at the same time B covered 3. So, they have completely interchanged their starting positions. Since their speed ratio is 5 and 3 and 5 and 3 are both odd numbers, this is what will keep on happening. They will keep on switching their ends. So, the next time when they are at any of the ends, B would come back to this position, A would come back to that position. So, they will never be at the same position at the same time. So, if they ask when will they meet at any of the ends, so the answer is never. They will never meet at the same end at any point of time. I hope this was clear. Thanks for watching.